Doff the tuxedo, call the limo, and open up a little bit of the bubbly, because you join me from the red carpet of the second annual BSWHAs Awards. It's very exciting here, lots going on, lots happening, lots of people here. It's a red carpet because I've spilled red wine on my carpet. There's no one here, I'm completely alone. It's such a momentous event when I upload now that it's actually worth marking the occasion. So welcome to not just any episode of the Real Life Podcast, but today is indeed the second annual BSWHAs Awards. That's the Bajoria's What Should Have Won Awards to the unfortunately uninitiated, and I deliberately missed out the first W from the acronym to save it from being the most inconvenient word in the world and sounding like drowning in the bath. So, what's going to happen at tonight's glorious event is I'm going to run through the major categories of the upcoming Oscars and give not only my predictions on the way the Academy will vote, but I will give out my awards to those who I believe have every right to win. Essentially, all award shows are stupid. It's a subjective medium, and it's all very well saying X is better than Y, but is it? Because who is to say, really? And I am constantly battling whether or not the Oscars matter. But I think they do. As a note to where the industry is at collectively, or on many fronts, or on innovation, on representation, on quality, on recognition, I think they do matter. But awards are still fundamentally silly. It's like whenever I sit down and try and rank anything in a top 3, that is a stupid idea, but it's fun. So here are my silly awards. Now, in the aid of avoiding total predictability for the upcoming awards, you'll be surprised to hear that Oppenheimer doesn't necessarily dominate the list. Though it is, of course, present, I think the Oscars are going to look very, very favourably on it. And so, in the interest of this podcast being better than Isn't Nolan brilliant, you may well be pleased to hear that Oppenheimer is in fact not at the top of my list of films of the year. I may well make a separate podcast or maybe even a YouTube video on that topic if I'm feeling particularly zingy. I adore Oppenheimer, of course. There are so many brilliant elements to it, but these awards are going to have a more widespread view on the general film landscape of the year. It is also worth noting that the BSWHAs do not have to come exclusively from the Oscar shortlist. They can be from anywhere in the realm of film. Any film that was eligible for the Oscars this year is eligible for the BSWHA, and this year I've seen all of the Best Picture nominees for the first time in any year, which I'm thrilled about. I'm sure everyone's eagerly awaiting the results of my awarding, which will certainly sit proudly on the shelves next to the other trophies of the winners. Side note, if anyone who is at all involved in any of the films that I award somehow manages to accidentally listen to this, which would be hysterical, please message me and I will happily send you some sort of trophy that I've created or bought or engraved or something. I'm not joking, I will do that. I didn't do original score last year, and that was a silly oversight, so I am going to do it this year. Now, I want to clarify that the decisions I've made this year have genuinely been incredibly tough. This is the most up-to-date I've ever been for a year of film in my life, and it's been an absolutely fantastic year to do that, because cinema has taken a fantastic direction. To anyone who says cinema's dead, you don't know what you're talking about, because this year is a perfect example just to prove you wrong. I'm on my way to see Dune 2 in the coming days. That's just been lauded as absolutely exceptional, so I'm very, very excited to see that. This year's a perfect example just to prove the people wrong who say that cinema is dying, because there have been countless brilliant films, and actually compiling the top 10 list that I have in terms of my favourites of the year was ridiculously hard. I had to leave out titles like Femme, Mission Impossible, How I Have Sex, Godzilla -1, The Killer, which I don't care what anyone says about boredom, I think is a really brilliant and careful piece of work, executed perfectly, pun intended. But enough yapping. Before this intro becomes as long as a Billy Crystal monologue, who I love by the way, let's get into the second annual BSWHAs, beginning with cinematography. So the Oscar nominees for cinematography are El Conde, Edward Lachman, Killers of the Flower Moon, Rodrigo Prieto, Maestro by Matthew Libatique, Oppenheimer, Hoyte van Hoytema, and Poor Things, Robbie Ryan. I believe the Oscars will be awarding Hoyte van Hoyte with this, which in all honesty I think is probably fair. the Hoyte van Hoytema work is brilliant. I mean, so much of Oppenheimer looks astonishing, and the use of IMAX to do intimate is a really clever idea, and it really paid off. The practical effects are astonishing. Like, I could not wrap my head around how they did that background shaking effect, given that the CGI wasn't used for that. You know, it just baffled me. And then I saw the trick that they used, which is to project that same background onto it and then shake that instead, minus the focus, which is utterly genius. And Hoyte's captured this so superbly. Everything at the Trinity test and the shots of the desert, and so much of it all looks magic. And the black and white, developing the film on IMAX with Kodak on black and white is fantastic. But from the Oscars list, there does seem to be two notable omissions where the Bushman nearly went, actually. So Lucas Joll, for The Zone of Interest, is, in my view, a criminal omission, right? He did such amazing work with Cold War, a film which, if you haven't seen, then you absolutely must make a point to. And The Zone of Interest is an absolute corker. So much of its genius, and the scaled back but deliberate and paced and carefully domestic cinematography is a superb reason as to why it is genius. The almost Jean Dillman style of just watching the domestic life occur like a fly on the wall while the most horrific atrocity happens around it is a genius piece of work. And on a side note to that, if Zone of Interest doesn't win the Oscar for sound design, then I will eat my socks, because it's the most horrifying soundscape, but it's such a brilliant contrast to the domiciled calm that you're seeing on the screen. So it's well worth an honorable mention there. The second omission, where the Bushwa was nearly awarded, and I'm quite serious about this, is Dan Laustsen for John Wick Chapter 4. This is a title which may crop up again. I cannot think of a single wasted shot, or a shot which doesn't look absolutely exceptional in one way or another. The overhead shot of the scene moving through the house is genuinely spectacular. And I mean, this film managed to make nearly 3 hours of almost exclusively combat and make it look different and interesting and exciting and giddy in a sense. I cannot stress enough how good John Wick Chapter 4 is. It's easily in my top 10 of the year. And even to someone who thinks these films are a joke, this proves on every level that they are not. It looks absolutely incredible. I'm legitimately considering having it share the award with my winner. It's so close. But when I think about the film, which had cinematography to die for, which made me physically jump up in my seat when I watched it in the cinema, which, side note, is very embarrassing in a packed screen, there's actually only one candidate. And the Bushwa for cinematography is going to Rodrigo Prieto for Killers of the Flower Moon. On 3 separate occasions, I literally turned to my flatmate who I was watching it with in the cinema and went, that was so fucking sick. And obviously, it's Prieto in heavy cohorts with like the best to ever do it in Scorsese, but his cinematic stamp is present, and the way the shots look are just beautiful. So here are the 3 examples I want to talk about. So the first one is when De Niro is punishing Leonardo DiCaprio in the checkered room, the floor with the checkers on it. It's so beautifully set up, and it's just a room, but the geography of the shot lets you see everything you need to, whilst reinforcing a two-faced figure who works best in the dark. A lot of the background of that shot is dark, and obviously the floor being black and white just contributes to this sort of two-sidedness of the De Niro character and the way he works and his methodologies. That's a great shot. I love that. Number 2 is the switch from day to night on the street holding on the same spot, which happens in an instant and just looks absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it's pristine. It's such a clever shot, because it must have been just the most incredibly quick time lapse or editing trick or whatever, but it's genuinely fantastic. And the third one is the best of the bunch. When the land has been, spoilers by the way, if you hadn't seen Killers of the Flower Moon, maybe sort of just mute this for the next 30 seconds. When the land has been set on fire, there's a scarecrow, a sort of silhouette of a scarecrow in amongst the flames, slightly out of focus. And you think it's a scarecrow at first, except it isn't. It's a white man just having a pause in the destruction because he has the time to do whatever he wants. He isn't a scarecrow helping to tend the land and being part of it in a symbiotic way. He's a destructor, he's an evil presence, and the switch from one to the other is the whole film captured in one shot, one kick-ass shot, and I utterly adored it. In fact, I adored the whole film. Take your It's Too Long and shove it where the flower moon don't shine, because every way to Sunday Killers is an absolutely extraordinary film. It takes home the cinematography bourgeois, no regrets. Okay, the next category is Best Original Screenplay, and the Oscar nominations are Anatomy of a Fall, written by Justine Triet and Arthur Harari, The Holdovers, written by David Hemmingson, Maestro, written by Bradley Cooper and Josh Singer, May December by Sammy Birch, story by Sammy Birch and Alex McKinnock, and Past Lives by Celine Song. Now, this is a three-horse race for me. Past Lives, The Holdovers, and Anatomy of a Fall. I think the Oscars are probably going to go with The Holdovers for this, which is not a bad choice at all. It's an utterly adorable, warm, well-observed and moving piece of work, which you don't want to let go of for a single second. It's brilliant, but I would say it's probably the safe choice of the three. That doesn't mean it's a bad choice, but it's the least ballsy of the three, because I think it's slightly more conventional in its writing than the other two. I think Past Lives is an exceptional script. I think Celine Song is going to be a name to be very, very excited about for a long time. She's clearly an absolute genius. But the beauty of the stripped-back element of the Past Lives feeds into its patience and its thoughtful silences. Sometimes what isn't said is what is, and that has to be written into a script in one way or another, be it via an omission or via a note, whatever it is, it has to be there. It is without a doubt one of the best films of the year, and the scene with Nora and Arthur lying in bed is one of the most moving scenes of a film I can remember, as are the final moments of the film, if you recall. I think it's brilliant. That bedroom scene spoke to me in an incredibly profound way. I thought it was just magical to watch, but it isn't winning the Bourgeois, which I think should tell you the level of genius of what is. The Bourgeois is going to Anatomy of a Fall by Justine Triet and Arthur Harari. It is wordy in all of the best ways. It's also quiet when it needs to be. It's an ebb and flow. It's a fluctuation, but on the best levels. But most importantly, I think it has the best written scene from the whole of cinema this year. The kitchen scene, when we don't see the explosive moment, we see the run-up to it and the perfect argument that happens before that, is just gold. Sandra Huller is the best. She kills this role, and she gets everything absolutely inch perfect in that moment. With the film moving between three languages, it's easy to sometimes forget that this is as impressive a courtroom drama as we've ever seen in terms of its writing. And, the fact that you don't know, you really don't know, and at any point, it could be anything. It really contributes to that three language thing. There's potentially three different perspectives that you could take on it. There's three different worlds you could inhabit, three different viewpoints. It's so clever. It's the highest level of writing, and I couldn't move a muscle while I was watching it. It was so brilliantly observed in terms of the content of that argument and the content of the piece, and it's worth every ounce of its salt as an Oscar nominee. You absolutely must find the time to watch this. And turn off your phone. Don't scroll. Mum, don't scroll. Just pay attention and enjoy this perfect linguistical display in all of its glory. So the Bourgeois goes to Anatomy of a Fall. On to adapted screenplay. The Oscar nominations are American Fiction, written by Cord Jefferson, Barbie by Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, Oppenheimer by Christopher Nolan, Poor Things by Tony McNamara, and The Zone of Interest by Jonathan Glazer. Come on. Come on. I want to give a giant shout out to Poor Things, actually, because it's very funny, it's very clever, wonderfully liberating and feminist and greatly observed, and actually does something very clever in the way that Bella's speech develops as her brain capacity increases. It's a really clever technique, and it's done so well, and Emma Stone captures it perfectly. If it won, I could completely understand it doing so, and I loved Poor Things. I thought it was excellent, and actually I think it may well be where the Academy goes in order to sort of save the awards from getting too samey. It's either that or the other one. And realistically, the Nolan screenplay for Oppenheimer is just fabulous. Divorcing myself from being a Nolan fan, this is what's been exciting for me about Oppenheimer, I will say, is that, being caught up on the year as a whole, being able to see all 10 nominations for Best Picture, what I have been able to do, and learning more about film as I go, is divorce myself from just being excited about things because it's Christopher Nolan or it's Cillian Murphy saying the things, a pairing that I absolutely love. I am capable of separating myself and going, well, that element isn't as good as this other film, and this film did that better than that, and X, Y, and Z. I'm not just sort of, being blinded by it the way that I would have before. But the screenplay for Oppenheimer is just fantastic. The incorporation of actual trial transcripts into the script. I mean, the script itself, for one thing, I never felt lost. It's an incredibly wordy film, like an incredibly wordy film. There's a lot of people talking in rooms about things in this film, and yet it's all the right words. That's sort of what I have to say. The scene where Oppenheimer is interrogated by Strauss about the Russian progression in the black and white scene around the round table is a brilliant encapsulation of it all. It moves the story forward with every scene, and I think it is precise and well measured. I will say the exclusion of Killers of the Flower Moon and actually The Killer itself are maybe mistakes for me. I'd have them both in there in a heartbeat, but personally I think Oppenheimer is the victor. In a film so much about the words that people say, to get the words right is important, and I think it's a mammoth task to take on something like that, and to execute it as well as Nolan did, and to have it just be the thing that was in Nolan's head, yeah, I think it's extraordinary. So I think the Oscars will go for Oppenheimer, potentially Poor Things, but the Bourgeois is going to Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer. On to Best Original Score, the category that I criminally left out last year, and I don't know why I did. The Oscar nominations this year are American Fiction by Laura Karpman, lovely to see a woman nominated again, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny by John Williams, Killers of the Flower Moon, Robbie Robertson, Oppenheimer, Ludwig Göransson, and Poor Things by Jerskin Fendrix. So, my prediction is fairly straightforward for this. I think Ludwig Göransson has this in the bag. Not because the others aren't good, but I just think his stands above. And that's where the Bush was going as well. The Bourgeois has to go for Oppenheimer for score. I didn't do score last year, as I mentioned, and I'm not going to spend ages on it this year either because of how sort of straightforward that prediction and awarding is. Last year, I would have said, no surprise, Empire of Light would be my score of the year by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. And yeah, I'm going straight down the line here again because it is the score of the year. It's all very well me trying to divorce myself from Nolan and say, well, I don't want to just, give it things that it doesn't deserve, because there are weaknesses with Oppenheimer. Again, the female element, again, is something that's really lacking, I thought, despite Emily Blunt's great performance and Florence Pugh's great performance. But the music is just a step ahead of every other score that came out this year. It's something to be marvelled at. I said it last time out with Roddy and Will. Can You Hear the Music is a thing of beauty. It's really special. And I've watched Ludwig break down how he managed to make it, and it's extraordinary. I said it was like something accelerating like a train, but what it actually reminds me of is something different. Göransson mentioned the prospect of it being about mastering something, about learning, and about becoming a master in the art of mathematics and physics, and the way the phrases shape up is like a mathematical exercise. It's fascinating. But it put me in mind of Bartók, who's a Hungarian composer, who was a big pedagogue in his life, and he created these pieces called Mikrokosmos, which were pieces which started off with very basic, simple five-finger positions, and by the end of the fifth piece, they're sort of compatible with his own Suzuki method, and not only do they get more complex, they get more atonal and interesting and busy. And Can You Hear the Music alongside Destroyer of Worlds feels like that perfectly, that pedagogy, that bringing the student into Bartók's world, that acceleration of learning and knowledge. It fits Oppenheimer brilliantly as a character, and that atonal thing, that dichotomy that he feels in terms of being proud of his work and doing something extraordinary, but then realising the catastrophic follow-on effects that it would have. I think it fits Oppenheimer brilliantly as a character, and I'm so in love with this score. I do want to say that Jerskin Fendrix for Poor Things is an excellent shout, and the music and the dance in particular is wicked, which is such a great scene. It tells you everything about their dynamic, that dance scene. But also Bella's theme itself is really well made and perfectly fits the style, and it feels classic Yorgos, and it all contributes well to the story. The thing about Poor Things for me personally is that it's so brilliantly batshit as a film that the score and various elements sort of get the anything goes pass. Yes, it's wacky and it's unusual and atonal, which is great because it's a deviation from the traditional stuff we do here, which I'm absolutely all for, trying out new stuff and being different, because that's a great idea. But because it's so unusual, it sometimes just ends up sounding like meaninglessly correlated notes, who could be someone mashing a piano or whatever. Now, I'm certain that's incredibly reductive, and I know that, and I bet there's loads that I haven't properly clocked, and motifs that I've missed and the like, and I do think there are moments of brilliance in it for sure, but it just didn't strike me in the same way as the Oppenheimer score did. And so many people, it's been memed to shit, as I mentioned, but I don't care. I have no shame in awarding the score, the BSWHA, Ludwig Göransson, Oppenheimer. Onto actress in a supporting role. Now, the Oscar nominations for this are Emily Blunt in Oppenheimer, Danielle Brooks in The Colour Purple, America Ferrera in Barbie, Jodie Foster in Nyad, and Da'Vine Joy Randolph in The Holdovers. So obviously there's some issues here. I've heard the defences of America Ferrera's nomination in that the speech she gives is pivotal in the film, and I understand that, and she delivers it wonderfully. She's great fun in Barbie. They all are. Everyone is great fun in Barbie. But it's never an Oscar nominee performance. I don't even think it's close. If anyone would be nominated as a supporting actress in that film, then it would have to be Kate McKinnon. Weird Barbie. I think that's inarguable. I think she's by far and away the best supporting actress in that film. Now, I'm almost certain where the Oscar is actually going to go, and I think it will be quite rightly going to Da'Vine Joy Randolph in The Holdovers, who is utterly wonderful. She's such a presence, measures her emotions so well, and lets things breathe when they need to, and has the perfect measure of gravitas when required, and is delightfully solemn at times, but then also incredibly warm and standing up for herself in the right, which she's just brilliant, and she would be an incredibly deserving winner. I'd be very happy to see her take the award home. It's a delightful display in nigh on perfect acting. I also want to give a big shout out for a nearly BSWHA winner to Alexandra Jensen for Talk to Me, which I think is a wonderful performance, which should absolutely be getting more attention. I think she does an excellent job at giving a nuanced approach to what could be a cliched and overdone character type. She is brilliant. Interestingly, no mention in the Oscar nominations for Rosamund Pike, which, if you're going to replace someone, that's a perfectly valid replacement in my book. Despite my reservations about Saltburn as a whole, she's sort of undeniably a great part of it. My choice, however, lies completely elsewhere in what I think is a genuine snub. Not the Margot Robbie or Gerwig snubs, which I'm sorry, they're just not snubs. Simply and plainly put, they are not snubs. The big snub is that Sandra Hüller is not nominated for both supporting and leading actress, because the BSWHA goes to Sandra Hüller in The Zone of Interest. Delphine Seyrig is so brilliant in Jean Dillman, and Sandra Hüller has that same quality here. She displays the brilliantly quiet, domicile nature of the character, the conservative status, observing part, the part which is locked in a complicated and slightly lacking marriage. It's not loveless, but it's not what you would dream a marriage to be, hence why she wants to stay where she's built the family life, rather than beg her husband to stay. She's alright with him going off as long as they get to stay where they are. She's brilliant on so many levels, and she deserves to be in this list big time, and it is a travesty to me that she isn't. That's why she wins the incredibly prestigious award that is the BSWHA for Actress in a Supporting Role. I think it's criminal she's not on the Oscar nominations, so that's where I'm putting my award. On to what I think is probably the most difficult category to pick for myself. Actor in a Supporting Role. The Oscar nominees are Sterling K. Brown for American Fiction, Robert De Niro for Killers of the Flower Moon, Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling for Barbie, and Mark Ruffalo for Poor Things. My nominations list would look like this, and yes, it's longer than the Oscar one, but it's my award, so fuck it. I appreciate they have to narrow it down to 5, right, but I have not done that. Robert Downey Jr., Oppenheimer, that would stay. Robert De Niro, Killers of the Flower Moon, that would stay. And then they'd all change. John Magaro, Past Lives. Antoine Renard, Anatomy of a Fall. Milo Machado Granda, Anatomy of a Fall. Swan Arlo, Anatomy of a Fall. Dominic Sessa, The Holdovers. And 2 that I very, very nearly awarded the BSWHA to. Scott Adkins, John Wick Chapter 4. Ian McShane, John Wick Chapter 4. I personally wouldn't have Ryan Gosling. As great as I think he is, and I don't want to reduce Barbie or make it seem like a bad film or that I'm anti it. It isn't. It's a very good film, and it does wonderful things, and it's very fun, and I had a great time watching it. But to me, the others deserve to be here over it. The three I mentioned from Anatomy of a Fall are just superb, and bearing in mind, three of them. Three potential winners. Antoine Reynas is the most brilliant prosecutor I've seen in a long time. He's brilliantly focused and fierce. Swan Arlo is calm but wise and a brilliantly well-reserved and measured character, but the one who wins the Bourgeois for me is Milo Machado Graner, who plays Daniel the son. The kid. Well, he sort of wins the Bourgeois. He's the most superb child actor I've seen in some time. I think he's genuinely extraordinary. It feels easily on a par with Haley Joel Osment for Sixth Sense in terms of its strength. You know, it's an incredibly mature performance for someone of his age, and I cannot believe that he's been ignored in the way he has by the award. I mean, he really is superb. He does brilliantly. The reason I say he sort of wins, he has won. His name will go down in the history books of the Bourgeois, which is literally at this moment in time a note on my phone. He's sharing the award. I know, you're supposed to pick a winner, that's how awards work, people lose, but fuck it, it's my award. He shares the award with John Magara from Past Lives, who plays Arthur. It's a really subtle performance, but it's, as I mentioned earlier, wonderfully observed, and it's relatable and devastating. I resonated with his character so much. I think he's delightful. If you haven't watched Past Lives, you absolutely must, and I really think his work stands out. I honestly couldn't pick between the two. In fact, I was literally inches away from having Scott Adkins share the award as well, who plays simply the most excellent villain in the best way to do a fat suit that there is in a very long time. And it's credence to the notion that I think that just because a character isn't speaking doesn't mean they don't have on-screen presence. He was genuinely so close, and Ian McShane is just kick-ass brilliant in everything ever. And he's played his part in John Wick so utterly fantastically. I adored that film, and I think him and Adkins were a huge reason why. But the Bourgeois goes to the pairing, John Magara from Past Lives, and of course, Milo Machado Graner from Anatomy of a Fall. As far as the Oscars go, it's going to be Downey Jr. I'm certain of that. I think I think they do have a really strong list of 5 nominees there, all of whom are great. I think De Niro is scarier than I've seen him in a very, very long time. He's the perfect performance to have in that film. I think Sterling K. Brown is a lot of fun. I think it's a great move for him. I'm really excited to see what else happens with him. Mark Ruffalo, it's a completely different thing we've seen him do before, so that was a lot of fun and he was very funny, but I think the Oscars will go with Downey Jr. partly on that basis. It's a different thing from what they've seen, and there's so much enjoyment about it. And he is fantastic. He's brilliantly fierce and cerebral. It's a great, great performance. But the Bourgeois go to the pairing that I mentioned before. On to actress in a leading role, the big one. As far as the Oscars go, their nominations look like this. Annette Bening for Naiad, Lily Gladstone in Killers of the Flower Moon, Sandra Hüller in Anatomy of a Fall, Carey Mulligan in Maestro, and Emma Stone in Poor Things. Now, this is a pretty stacked category. I mean, it really is. Everyone Oscar nominated is brilliant, like absolutely fantastic. The only exclusion for me probably is Greta Lee for Past Lives, who I also thought was wonderful, absolutely. Emma Stone is delightful, a real treat, a masterclass in progression of character. She was excellent, and Carey Mulligan was standout in Maestro. She was the best bit of the film easily, genuinely superb. She commanded every moment, and she's a fantastic actress, one of the very, very best that there is, in my opinion. This is a tricky choice, and my love for Sandra Hüller and her work this year so nearly made her the double winner for the Bourgeois, because she's different gravy in Anatomy of a Fall. I mean, she really is, properly amazing acting. The kitchen scene, as I mentioned, telling you everything, but also all of the courtroom, the fear in there, and, just all of it together. But for me, the winner who just tips it, and who I think is also going to win the Oscar, is Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon. Anyone complaining that she gets not enough time to be herself because of the poisoning thing, spoiler, can just get lost. That isn't actually an issue that needs complaining about. It's what happens, it's the story, it's what the themes are, it's what the white people did to the Osage people. Don't complain, that's the story, and it doesn't stop her being excellent. Regardless, she provides the standout performance with 2 of the greatest actors of all time alongside her, and she is the one who stands out. She is absolutely extraordinary, and how brilliant that she may well become the first Native American winner of that award. You know, her character shift is another one to behold, from being a bold and cerebral and calm character, you know, above the boyish advances of Leonardo DiCaprio, to one imparting the trust she would hope to be able to get from her loving husband despite getting worrying signs back, to a hurt and dying character who acts as a perfect symbol for the whole situation, who has to make the most horrific choice. I was spellbound by her. I think she's a phenomenal actress. I can't wait to see what she does next. She has the most bombastic presence I've seen in a while, and she commands all the scenes in just the right way. You believe her and you want to believe her. Her grief, her joy, her hope, they're palpable. And sometimes she just makes you emotionally hurt. It's a glorious performance. So here I think the Oscars and the Bushwa are going to sync up for Lily Gladstone, Killers of the Flower Moon. Okay, on to actor in a leading role. Oscar nominations look like this: Bradley Cooper in Maestro, Coleman Domingo in Rustin, Paul Giamatti in The Holdovers, Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer, and Jeffrey Wright in American Fiction. This one's less exciting, in all honesty, because I think it's a dead cert. If you know me, you know who I'd pick. Now, I do think Teo Yu is a notable omission. I personally would have had Keanu Reeves in here, in all honesty, you know, because it's a physical performance of the highest class. And I know he has about 10 lines in the whole thing. I don't care. It's not any less impressive a performance than any other because of how physical it is. You know, you don't have to be speaking to have presence as an actor. But let's just be honest. If anything was going to stick out from Oppenheimer, it's Cillian Murphy. He is one of the finest actors in the world. He's just the complete package. With a work ethic to admire above all else, he is the perfect study to study up close on IMAX for 3 hours. I think he's supreme. His subtle expression changes are quite something to behold, and he completely embodies the character on every single level. I'm a huge Cillian Murphy fan. I love Peaky Blinders and so much of his work. Sunshine is one of my favourite films ever, and I'd be so excited if he won the Oscar, because it would feel like someone that I've been appreciating and championing for ages would finally have, you know, reached the biggest stage or whatever, you know, all that kind of rubbish. But I'm predicting he will. I'm scared because I don't want to get my hopes up in case there's some sort of spanner in the works waiting to happen, but I think he will win. I think he should win, and I think it's one of the finest screen performances in several years. I think he's astonishing, and then hopefully after all this is over, people can leave him alone for a bit and he can have his life without having to answer the same questions again and again and again, and only talking about his work with Nolan and the fact that they've done 6 films now, and when they did Inception they had the whole set built on a gimbal, you know, all this kind of stuff which I've heard a million times, which still fascinates me. He must be bloody exhausted. Paul Giamatti is, it's worth noting, an absolute tour de force in The Holdovers. I could watch him for hours, be so charismatic, and the presence that he is in that film. It's a moving performance as well as a very deserved nomination. I think he would be the only other person I'd be all right with winning it other than Cillian Murphy. And please do watch The Holdovers because it's just a delight. I loved it, and you know, he really is a character in that film. I mean, he's embodied him absolutely. But there's just no denying, I think, that the male performance of the year is Cillian Murphy's. I think that's where the Oscar will go, and I think that's where the Bushwa is going to go. So they sync up. Cillian Murphy, Oppenheimer will take home the awards for leading actor. On to Best Director, and the Oscar nominations look like this: Anatomy of a Fall, Justine Triet; Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese; Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan; Poor Things, Yorgos Lanthimos; and Zone of Interest, Jonathan Glazer. Genuinely, all of these nominees are worthy winners in my opinion. I think it's the best directing category in a long, long time, but I think they'll make it Nolan's time. I think after so many occasions when they got it wrong, they may be about to make it right. I think he should have won for Dunkirk and The Dark Knight. Inception's a tricky one because of, you know, The Social Network being in the same year, which is, you know, directing a dream piece. It's the gold standard of directing that film. But I think the Oscars are finally going to give him the award that he deserves throughout his career. I'm struggling with my pick for the Bushwa, to be honest. I think Celine Song has every right to be in that list, but I can't really argue with any of them. I'd want her in there, but I don't want to take anyone out either, because I think the Oscars will pick Nolan. It's tempting for me to go elsewhere, but I don't know if I can. It's between three of them for me: Nolan, Scorsese, and Trier. All three of them have made such incredible things. There are little bits and pieces which make everything move from good film to great film. I mentioned earlier the shots from Killers of the Flower Moon, but there is so much to it that makes it just an exceptional piece of cinema. Justin Trier clearly has the ability to extract some unbelievable performances from her actors, and also writes like a genius and frames really efficiently. The things in frame and often what isn't in it tells you absolutely everything you need to know with Trier, and I think that's a wonderful technique. I really am divorcing myself from loving Nolan, and that's why this is a hard choice. But he deserves it. If you want to talk directing, Nolan was the best this year, going to develop black and white film, IMAX film with Kodak, working using subjective viewpoints, practical effects, sound design at its best, and the fact that he has a hand in every single stage of the process is fabulous to me. I think it's wonderful directing. I just watching the details in Oppenheimer, they're important, and they're the right way to do spectacle. I hate to be boring and predictable, but I think I'm going to give the Bushwa to Christopher Nolan. It was so nearly Justin Trier, and even Scorsese, I think, he's the best to ever do it. Let's be honest, he's a ridiculously good filmmaker, and Justin Trier has been just blowing the socks off of everyone with Anatomy of a Fall. But if I'm honest with myself, for commitment to the craft, if nothing else, Christopher Nolan will take home the Bushwa, and indeed, I think the Oscar. So here we are then. On to the last one, the big one, Best Picture. So, here are the Oscar nominees for Best Picture. The 10 films, the first year that I've seen all 10 of them: American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. This is the biggie. But I'm not going to do the boring and obvious thing here, I promise. American Fiction I admire greatly, but I don't love. I think it's excellent satire. I think it has a really strong set of performances, well written and cleverly seen, but I just didn't find myself falling in love with it. But it is undeniably good. Maestro is a confused mess. I think the performances, though Cooper can be way too hammed up on occasion, are good. I think it's shot interestingly, but sometimes it feels like style for the sake of style. Its lighting is really strange on certain occasions, and I think it likes to set up shots which it thinks look pretty but don't actually tell you much on occasion, and the writing of it is muddled. I love Poor Things. I think it's brave, I think it's really clever, I think it's got just the right amount of weird, and the more I thought about it, the more I liked it, and the better it got, which is always a sign of a great film. Really is, it's something special. It's a great piece of work, and it's a worthy nominee in all the areas that it's there. Last year I did a top 5 ranking, and this year I shall do exactly the same, but this year that is so hard. You know, I prefaced it at the start, and perhaps the fact that this script is now 5,000 words long as I'm writing it suggests that there is lots to be said for every film. But I gave myself a difficult task, so I shall do it. Here are my top 5 films of the year, and the number 1, obviously, wins the Bushwa. So at number 5, The Zone of Interest. Everything I've mentioned before, the Jean Dielman type, the horror of everything you hear but not what you see, the calmness of what you do see, and the cleverness of the fly on the wall, the setup shots, the actions of the actual characters themselves, the mood, the noises, the sound design, the music of it as well, the dream sequences, which I didn't get, but then I did. It's a fantastic film. It's one of the most important films, I think, in a while. Even though the ending for me is slightly oddly toned, I think it's great, and deservedly in my top 5 list. Number 4 is Killers of the Flower Moon. I've mentioned everything already, but I don't care that it's 3.5 hours long. I just adored it. I thought it's the kind of film you just get lost in, and it washes over you in all the best ways possible. Number 3 is Oppenheimer. Now, you may be saying, Dom, there's 2 films ahead of this, and you picked Nolan for directing. What are you doing? Well, fair, and I nearly picked someone else for directing, but as I mentioned, the commitment to the craft and everything that went with it, and all the mystique and the event of it, the Barbenheimer thing was so much fun, and listen, I know so much about Oppenheimer now because of all the interviews and all the things that I've read. Reading the interview in Sight and Sound is a fantastic interview, and hearing all the things about the way it went down, the way that Nolan works, the way his sets are, the way he functions, the way he gets all of his crew together, no seats on set, all this kind of thing. I just thought it was fantastic. Obviously lacking in the female character department, and I'm praying that whatever Nolan does next, it's something that can give some female characters some time to shine. I was speaking with my friend Ramsey the other day, and he said, I don't know if Christopher Nolan's ever met a woman. And, I thought that was interesting. He's married to one, and yet somehow he still manages to fail to churn out properly fleshed out female characters in quite a lot of his films. So that is an issue. And maybe that's one of the things that keeps it down the list. And also, I don't want to get too carried away with the spectacle of all of it, because, I'm aware that there are little things wrong with it. But I just loved it, and I got excited about it. So I make no bones for championing it when I do. But it is only at number 3, and number 2 is Past Lives. That may come as a little bit of a curveball, to be honest, given that it hasn't won anything from what I've given it. And I think that's because it feels like everything that contributes into it helps it to be the sum of its parts. It's not like certain individual things are standout. Obviously I gave John Magaro the supporting actor Bushwa, but I think it all just comes together really nicely. I think everything about it feels like an equal cog in the machine of the film, and I can't remember a film like that in a long time. The directing from Celine Song is just perfect. The way that it's phrased and the timing of it all is a delight. I think the actors are all superb. I think the script is nigh on perfect. It looks beautiful. It's emotional, and I had a really, really lovely time watching it, despite the fact that it is quite sad. And I can't find much fault with it at all, if I'm honest with you. It's not this great, big, epic thing. It's not this 3.5 hour long, massive anthology chronicling someone's very complicated life or a complicated event. It's a very human and small story about two people and the way they interact and their history together and their relationship. But it's so brilliant, It's just so captivating and clever and simple. It's simple in the best way possible. It's simple in the way that a human story about some characters would need to be, and I can't recommend it highly enough. It's really, really worth the hour 45 or whatever it is, that you need to give it. I loved it, and I make no apologies for it being at number 2 in my list, but of course, it means you can probably guess what number 1 is. The BSWHAs this year, for 2024, the Best Picture BSWHAs goes to Anatomy of a Fall. Justine Triet's masterpiece takes it. A delightful all-round story with, a line which leaves you feeling powerless because you just don't ever know. And that's the brilliance of it. There are moments when Sandra Hüller's character seems genuinely evil and heartless, and other times when you just want everything to stop and her to escape. The scene in the snow when Sandra, played by Sandra, is laughing and almost flirting with Vincent, the Swan Arlo character. It sits really uncomfortably anyway, but even more uncomfortable when you think about what might have happened, when you think about the coldness that it would take for her to potentially be at fault for the crime and then still have this kind of happy-go-lucky, joyous attitude towards Swan Arlo's character. It's fantastic cinema. It's a great performance, and the Triet writing makes it clear. She's quick to deny the fact that she had anything to do with the incident, but Triet's writing makes it clear that isn't enough. And she may well want to make it clear that is the case, but from minute one we have suspicions, and the whole thing is a clever, gripping affair, and all departments come together so brilliantly. It's really worth winning Film of the Year, I think, despite the fact that, I think Oppenheimer will take it at the Oscars. That's where my prediction goes as far as what the Oscars will do. I think this really should bang its own drum. It's special filmmaking, and it's a story which took me with it, and I never once thought about anything else while I was there. So there it is. The second annual BSWHAs are complete. And a new set of filmmakers walk away from this being the proudest moment of award seasons. One kid from Northumberland says, "I like your film," and none of them are there to hear it because who on earth would be listening? That was a lot of hard work and difficulty putting that list together, so if you could get people to listen to this at all, or recommend it to anyone, or leave some positive feedback somewhere, I'd love that. We shall see on Sunday what the Academy decides to do. I, for one, think I will be staying up until 4 a.m. watching it. Good job I don't have any uni classes on Mondays, because a long sleep will need to be had. The recommendations for this week are twofold. Anatomy of a Fall, because it won the ultimate Bushwa, and 2, a film called Sorry to Bother You, directed by Boots Riley. I could do a whole episode on that film. I think it's a work of genius. I think it's utterly hysterical. It feels like a Jordan Peele film, and I really love that sort of altered Afro-surrealist style that the pair of them seem to be going for, which is so appealing to me. So definitely give it a watch. Thank you so much for listening. I hope everyone is well and things are going how you want. As they say, things will be alright in the end, and if they aren't alright, then it isn't the end. So stay safe, and I shall talk with you again soon. Bye!